We focused the fastest four on inflation more times than I can count over the past 4 years. When it was surging at historical levels, we watched every month for some sign of relief, and we finally got it. And although the most recent data showed that the inflation rate is still higher than the Federal Reserve would like, it has returned to average historical levels, which makes it more manageable. Well, this week, we're discussing inflation again, but from a different perspective. First, we're not looking backward, but we're looking forward and leaning on opinion from a man who we closely follow to get some thoughts on the potential impact of President Trump's radical policy changes that are in the earliest of stages of implementation. Brian Wesbury is the chief economist for First Trust Advisors, an investment company that we use for many client portfolios. And he wrote recently that the idea that Trump's policies on tariffs, immigration, and government budget cuts would cause inflation is false. He points out that in Trump's first term, he raised tariffs, and inflation averaged just 1.9% annually. Now, while Wesbury acknowledges tariffs do put upward pressure on prices for the items that are tariffed, he makes the case that it will put downward pressure on everything else, unless the Federal Reserve increases the money supply faster. As for immigration, advocates for higher immigration say immigrants don't take away jobs or reduce wages, but they increase both the supply of labor and increase the demand for goods and services. So the argument is reducing immigration would cause inflation to rise. Again, Wesbury uses recent history to challenge that. He writes that from 2021 to 2024, immigration surged, but so did inflation, averaging almost 5% per year. Finally, Wesbury tackles DOGE. Critics say the recent thought floated by Trump that some of the money saved from spending cuts would be returned to taxpayers as a dividend would cause more inflation. Wesbury uses some simple math to highlight that if DOGE reduces government spending by $1 and policymakers send out checks to the public worth 20 cents, the deficit would still fall by 80 cents. But even if that doesn't happen, the budget deficit would not cause inflation, he points out. In recent history, America has dealt with a large deficit with low inflation after the 2008-2009 financial crisis. And we've had a large deficit with high inflation after COVID. So the overall point Wesbury attempts to make in his article is that it's not higher tariffs, lower immigration, or a budget deficit that causes inflation. It's the Federal Reserve. He says it's true that bigger government makes inflation more likely. Government takes money from taxation or through borrowing. And the bigger the government gets, the smaller the private sector gets. That, Wesbury says, reduces economic growth. And if the Fed reacts to slower growth by printing more money to buy government debt and finance government spending, then inflation rises. Of course, you can find lots of opposing thought to that, but it is worth considering as the political rhetoric grows louder over the months ahead. And that rhetoric is usually created and used to try to win elections, not necessarily to solve problems. Banging the inflation drum worked for Republicans in 2024. It remains to be seen if Democrats will be able to take advantage of it in the midterm elections next year. Thanks for watching. Want to become smarter financially in 4 minutes or less? Sign up at fastest4.com to get insights and updates like this delivered to your inbox weekly.